Greetings. This is Doc Ock coming to you live and direct today from Black Facts Headquarters Central with still at the beginning stages of a very special series on Dr. W. Crosby. And today just happens to be his 88th birthday, November 4, 88 years old, November 4, 2020. 88 years old, Dr. Edward W. Crosby. Okay. Keep him in our hearts and our prayers every day we do. So let's go ahead and get into it. Today, the proverb is, the rat cannot call the cat to account. The rat cannot call the cat to account. Think about it. And that's a proverb from the area of Niger. Okay, a Niger proverb. And the poem for today is also, again, we're featuring from our featured artist, poet, Eugene Redmond. Out of the book, River of Bones, Flesh, and Blood. Bones and Flesh and Blood. Now, what river would that be? None other than the mighty Mississippi. The mighty Mississippi River. That's right, Mississippi. It's got 4 eyes and it still can't see. Mississippi. So let's see what poet Eugene Redmond has to say about the river of bones and flesh and blood, the mighty Mississippi, as it goes through all its changes. River of time, vibrant vein, bent, crooked, older than the red men, who named you ancient as the winds that break on your serene and shining face. One-time western boundary of America, from whose center your broad shoulders now reach to touch sisters on the flanks. River of truth, mornings you'd leap yon 2,000 miles and shed a giant joyous tear over sprouting, straggling hives of humanity. Nights you weep as the moon, tiptoeing across your silent, silky face, hears you praying over the broken backs of black slaves who rode crouched and huddled at your heart in the bellies of steamships. River of memory, laboratory for civil war, boat builders who left huge eyes of steel staring from your sullen depths. Reluctant partner to crimes of Ku Klux Klansmen. River moved to waves of ecstasy by the venerable trumpet of Louis Armstrong. River of bones and flesh. River of bones and flesh and blood, the nation's largest intestine and longest conveyor belt. River Mississippi. It's got 4 eyes and it still can't see, otherwise known as the Mississippi. River of little rivers, river of rises, sometimes subdued by a roof of ice, descending finally on your southward course to spit into the Gulf and join the wrath of larger. River of bones and flesh and blood, a book of poetry by protege, Edward W. Crosby protege, none other than Eugene Redmond. Now, yesterday, we tried to read a selection from Dr. Crosby's autobiography titled Doing It the Hard Way. And you know, Doc couldn't do it any other way but the hard way. That's right. So, we had some problems, technical difficulties, but we decided to go ahead and do what we had avoided doing for years, which is to print out a copy. Not Dr. Crosby, when he printed it out, we had printed copies around here, but he printed it out half size, very, very tiny little type. So I wanted it full size because I'm going to be going through here doing some editing. This is from a rough draft. This is not for publication. This is not a completed copy. This is just some of his thoughts and memories in type. So here we go. Reflections on my doing it the hard way, reflections on my life and work. And he starts off with a quote from Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Son, after I'm gone, I want you to keep up the good fight. I never told you, but our life is a war, and I have been a traitor all my born days, a spy in the enemy's country ever since I give up my gun back in the Reconstruction. Live with your head in the lion's mouth. I want you to overcome him with yeses, undermine him with grins, agree him to death and destruction. Let them swallow you whole till they vomit or bust wide open. Learn it to the youngins. With the large influx of European immigrants in the 1870s, and with the annexation of bordering suburban communities, Cleveland, Ohio, was allowed to grow into a medium-sized urban city with a population of 93,000 people. This population increase made the city the sixth largest city in the USA. And with this designation, Cleveland became a very important industrial city. By the beginning of World War I, Cleveland's Black population also increased exponentially from 1,293 in 1870 to 71,899 in 1930. It's a lot of people. That was just the Black population as a result of the great Black exodus from the American South. During the 1960s, 250,818 African Americans lived in the city. The total population of the city at that time was 876,050 people. The stock market crash of 1929 ended the prosperity the city enjoyed after World War I, and the ensuing Great Depression following the crash of Wall Street brought havoc to the African American population. Beginning in 1929 and lasting for the next several years, well into the 1940s, this economic cataclysm took place after Cleveland had made, during the 20 years preceding 1929, great progress in industrial and commercial development. Afterwards, Black Clevelanders suffered severely from widespread unemployment and social dislocations. The Depression and its concomitant economic despoilation of Cleveland's population, white and Black, lasted until the early World War II years. The city's Black citizens were, however, impacted more severely. It took President Franklin D. Roosevelt's election on November 8, and not long after his ability, during his first 100 days in office, starting on March 4th, 1933, to spearhead major legislation and issue several executive orders. He instituted the New Deal, a variety of programs designed to produce relief. In other words, programs that consisted of government jobs for the unemployed and welfare programs for the underemployed. Through these programs and executive orders, Roosevelt also orchestrated economic recovery and needed reforms of Wall Street, banks, and transportation. Two of the three Wall Street brokers and bankers' greed were the rapacious cause of the nation's economic collapse. Two of the three Wall Street brokers and bankers' greed were the rapacious cause of the nation's economic collapse. Roosevelt's declaration of war against Japan and later Germany on December 8th, 1941, brought a slow end to the economic crisis that besieged not only black and white Clevelanders, but the entire country. The start of World War II and the injection of a war economy signaled the recovery and the end of the longest, most widespread, and deepest depression of the 20th century. As pointed out above, this traumatic period was preceded by the Great Migration of Black people from America's Southern Black Belt. A second Southern exodus took place during the World War II years. This second migration was spurred in the early 1940s by the racial discrimination laws in the South, otherwise known as Jim Crow, and better economic prospects in the North, and continued into the 1970s. Between 1910 and 1930, approximately 6 million or more Black people migrated from Virginia, Alabama, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Mississippi. Indeed, all 14 quote-unquote Black Belt states contributed to the migration into the industrial North and West. Black people moved from these states to escape the rigid Black codes, Jim Crow regulations white Southerners introduced after the end of the Civil War in 1865 and the Compromise of 1877, sometimes referred to as the Rutherford B. Hayes, who was a Republican, Samuel J. Tilden, the Democrat, Compromise. Okay, so the Hayes-Tilden Compromise is what it was known as in short. That ended the 1863 to 1877 Reconstruction era and allowed Hayes, a Southerner, to assume the presidency. No, that ain't right. See, that's why I'm editing this as I go. Hayes was not a Southerner. Hayes was the Northerner. It allowed the Northerner, Hayes, a Northerner, to assume the presidency. Yeah, I know he's a Northerner because he's born right here in Ohio, and I've been to his house right over here outside of Sandusky in Toledo, Ohio. So, no, he was not a Southerner. He was a Northerner. To assume the presidency. Rayford Logan referred to this compromise as the nadir, or great betrayal of Black people in both the South and the North. So, as a direct consequence of this bargain, white Southerners were literally told the post-Civil War Reconstruction era had ended and white supremacy, or virtual slavery, was reestablished throughout the solid South. All of this on top of poor crops and the low wages Blacks earned from tenant farming signaled desperate times for Black people. Throughout the nation. By the eve of the Depression, wages for Black farm workers in Alabama had dropped to an incredible 50 to 65 cents a day for men and 40 cents for women. Similar bad times were felt throughout the South, and eventually these times spread into the North. Frederick Douglass Highsmith, that's my granddaddy, changed his name to Crosby and left New Orleans, Louisiana, according to him, at the age of 13. Often in his old age, he would say he was born in New Orleans. However, his future wife, for some reason, always took Greenville, Mississippi to be his birthplace. In 1962, shortly after he retired from Thompson Aircraft, otherwise known as TAPCO, in Euclid, Ohio, just outside Cleveland, he and my mother left their farm in Chardon. My father always longed to return to the urban, but nevertheless rural life he remembered as a boy in Louisiana. When the family bought around 1942 a family house at 3353 East 52nd Street, East 132nd Street in Cleveland, Ohio, the family's living standards were on an upswing. Fred and Marion decided to live on the second floor of this house, even though it would be cramped, because they could charge the family on the first floor a higher rent. The result of this arrangement meant my brothers and I had to sleep in the somewhat roomy basement. My oldest brother, Fred, and I slept together in a double bed. My younger brothers, in order of age, Bobby, Richard, and Kenny, slept together in another double bed a few feet distant from me and Fred. My sister Betty lucked out. Oh, okay, let me go back to that part again right there. My younger brothers, okay, so Fred and Ed slept together in a double bed. My younger brothers, in order of age, Bobby, Richard, and Kenny, slept together in another double bed a few feet distant from me and Fred. That had to be really tight. Okay, all three of them in the same bed. My sister Betty lucked out with her room being upstairs on the second floor with my parents. This sleeping arrangement for us boys worked well, considering we wouldn't be living and sleeping in this house for long. My mother had wanted to put us children on the third floor. However, to do so, the floor would have to be renovated. That is, divided into rooms, and according to housing regulations, they would have to have a fire escape installed. Even though she and my father were employed, they couldn't afford to do either of the two renovations. At the time, my family moved into Mount Pleasant in 1942. Fred was 14, I was 10, Bobby was 9, Richard was 7, and Kenny was 2. My sister Betty was 12. We enjoyed being out of the Outhwaite public housing project, where we seldom saw any grass. What grass we did happen to recognize had been so trampled, all we could see were grass patches. Every other space was either brick or concrete. When we moved, it was almost literally the first time we saw grass, and our neighbors were adamant about us former slum dwellers keeping off their grass, which they would shout at us constantly as if we had never seen grass before. Well, we hadn't seen well-kept lawns before. Indeed, lawn was a new word to be added to our vocabulary and remembered along with lawn mower, whatever that thing was. Shortly afterwards, in 1946 or 47, we moved into a more accommodative single-family dwelling at 3254 East 130th Street. Here, each of us boys had his own bed. Oh, they were high side in there. And it was here that I really began to stretch out. And so I'm going to end right about there. And I think that's a pretty good spot to end at, right about in there. So as you can see, he went into a lot of details in terms of where he grew up at and how he grew up, etc. We're not going to be able to read the whole book, but we're going to read some good portions of this book as we go along. As I said, this is going to be like when I did Amos Tutuola. If you recall, if y'all been watching for a while, you recall I did Amos Tutuola's book for a month. It took me a month to go through that book. And I did actually make it to the end of the book. This one, I probably won't make it to the end of the book, but I will be able to give you some idea of the experiences of Dr. Edward W. Crosby that went into the making of the man. What forces, what crucible was he forged out of? And I think that's a proper metaphor, because he did grow up in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was known as a steel producing town. So, and as you all know, if you ever encountered Dr. Crosby, he was a steel driving man, and each and every one of us was a steel, and he drove us just like John Henry with a hammer in his hand. So, till tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and may your tomorrow be the best tomorrow that ever was. We're still waiting on election results. So stay calm, and carry on. That's the directive for today. Stay calm and carry on. And in the meantime, we're still looking for more donations for our 2020 campaign. We're not even anywhere near November 20th yet, but we're looking forward to seeing those donations come right in. I told you before, you can donate through Amazon. All you got to do is click on the Amazon smile icon, sign up in there, and list us as the beneficiary. Okay. And I don't think I forgot to put that icon back up on top, but it should be pasted on the top of my pinned to the top of one of my Facebook groups. I'm gonna go back and make sure I got it pinned. I'll try and pin it to my my homepage, and I'll try and pin it to the top of the Center of Pan-African Culture. Okay, if I haven't done that already, I'm gonna make sure to do that just to make it easy for you to find the Amazon Smile link that will take you to the Black Facts Education and Research Incorporated page, and you can sign up to send 10% of certain purchases that you make through Amazon to Black Facts. Not 10%. It's more like 1/2 of 1%. So it's a very small percentage. But if a whole lot of people do it, that little tiny percentage will add up. And that's what we need. We need numbers of people to sign up for that. All right. So we appreciate y'all. We love y'all out there. We hope you're enjoying what we're doing here and really paying attention. I see a couple folks out there waving at me today, like Ronnie. How you doing today, Ronnie? And who else is out there waving at me? Solomon. What's going on, Solomon? Long time no hear from. All right, now. Peace out, y'all. We'll be black tonight at 9 and tomorrow at noon. This is Doc Ock, as always, at noon and 9. Signing off.